Welcome to Back in Crime, a podcast presented by Texas Crime Travelers. I'm Stewart Fillmore, retired FBI agent.
And I'm Todd Hiles, retired Secret Service agent. In this podcast, we cover cases we worked and some we wish we had.
As lifelong street agents, we were where the rubber met the road.
While the big guys were doing press conferences, we were interviewing the criminals.
And because of that, we can take you inside these cases.
And under the crime scene tape.
This is Back in Crime. Welcome to part 2 of the kidnapping of Frank Sinatra Jr. in 1963. In part 1, we talked about how the crime was conceived and set up and how the kidnappers carried out their plan. Now the kidnappers have successfully gotten Jr. to a Los Angeles safe house, and Frank Sinatra and the FBI are waiting for the ransom call.
That's right. They're up in Reno in a hotel room, waiting for this
smoking
call.
cigarettes.
Exactly. the room's full of smoke. You got an FBI agent sitting in there staring at that phone. They've been staring at it now probably for over 12 hours.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how kidnappings work. You're at that stage of it, you're a little bit at their mercy.
So now we're going to enter the fourth stage of this, and this is the kidnapper's demand.
Okay.
So they're at the safe house. The kidnappers are there, and they now realize they don't have Frank Sinatra's phone number.
Yes. You would think of all the extensive planning, that would be a big one to have.
That would be. But they think that they're just going to ask Junior for the number.
Yeah.
And, of course, he refuses to give them the telephone number.
Yeah.
To his dad or to his mom.
You know, that's, and again, it's one of those things, it's psychologically, I'm sure that Junior was scared. But maybe by this point, he's kind of felt these guys out. And, because initially he cooperates with them. He's willing to, take his ring off and play along with the cops to get through the roadblock. But now they get to Los Angeles and all of a sudden, no, I'm not helping you guys out. So I think probably he had time to assess who they were, and maybe he realizes these guys are not dangerous.
Right. Or maybe that he's sort of now in charge.
Yeah.
That he's controlling the shots. So this is where Keenan calls in guy number 3, John Irwin.
He's the big, older, intimidating guy.
He's the muscle. So Irwin shows up at the safe house. He goes in. He has a talk with Junior. And I guess, he's probably like a father figure to Junior because he's that much older. And again, Junior refuses to give up his dad's phone number.
Okay. Even with Irwin there, even the big, tough muscle guy.
And now this is where it really gets crazy. So hold on to your seat. Are you ready for this? Keenan now realizes that he forgot to check out of his hotel in Tahoe.
Okay.
And that he forgot to pay
the bill.
Yeah. And he does not want housekeeping going into that room because inside the room is the wigs and masks.
All the accoutrements of the
kidnapping that they forgot to bring on the kidnapping, but they left them there.
But more importantly, they forgot to take them with them.
Yeah, they forgot to wear them during the kidnapping, but then they left them there.
Okay.
So on the radio, they hear, again, this is a ton of media attention.
Yeah.
And there's breaking news all the time.
Oh, yeah. This was a big deal.
And so one of these news bulletins comes out and says, hey, they're looking for two guys that are driving a white Chevrolet.
Yes.
But Keenan knows he's got to get back to Lake Tahoe. So Keenan rents a red car in Los Angeles, and he goes and he picks up a female friend and says, hey, let's go skiing up in Lake Tahoe.
So another road trip, a phony road trip to get someone to go up to Lake Tahoe with you.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he knows that with her, he can get through the roadblocks that are still set up.
Yeah, no one will give him a second glance.
And again, he hasn't slept much.
Yeah.
He's driven all the way back in a snowstorm from Lake Tahoe back to Los Angeles.
I can promise you, I mean, in his mind, he's worrying, he's scared, he's nervous, so he's not thinking clearly, obviously, but this is a stressful situation for him. So those two drive all the way back to Lake Tahoe, and when they get there, this town is just crawling with FBI agents. I bet, yeah. Because it's not really that big, where the casinos are and everything. It all surrounds the lake, so it's a small area.
And I think Keenan will actually get into an elevator with FBI agents.
Yeah.
And he'll have a conversation with them.
Yeah. Hey, how's it going? What's up? What are you guys doing?
Yeah. And again, you have to think at this moment in time, Keenan is probably the #1 most wanted person in America.
Without a doubt. Yes.
And there he is talking
and he's just right there
to the FBI
yes.
agents. Keenan will actually get a little nervous about turning around and going back to Los Angeles because he thinks that maybe the FBI are going to be watching him.
Yeah.
So he actually decides then to go skiing with his friend.
Okay. Gonna play it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that they actually take a couple runs down the hill.
Yep.
And before they drive back to Los Angeles.
Okay.
But on the way to Lake Tahoe, right before he gets to Lake Tahoe, he hears a breaking news come out that says Frank Sinatra is in a hotel in Reno with the FBI.
Okay.
So now Keenan doesn't need that phone number anymore because he knows the hotel
Yes.
that he's at. So, again, picture this. These FBI agents and Sinatra sitting in this hotel room. It's on the evening of December 9th when Keenan calls Frank's hotel room number.
Yes. Now, had Keenan made it back to Los Angeles by this point?
No, Keenan is still up there in Nevada.
Okay.
When he makes the call to Sinatra's hotel
Sinatra,
room.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he talks to Sinatra. And again, this is the call the FBI is waiting for, right?
Oh, yeah.
He gets the call. Sinatra immediately demands that his son be returned to him.
Yes.
Keenan says, hey, you need to go to a payphone in Carson City, Nevada, and wait
no
for
doubt
another
this
call.
was all part. Now this was all part of Keenan's plan. I'm sure he had this in his notebooks, and once this call was made, how I'm actually going to get the money.
Right. Yeah. Keenan knows that they have to keep using payphones.
Yes.
Because he again feels that the FBI can track phone calls, but not a short phone call. A longer phone call they can. That's why they have a script.
Yes.
Because they know they can get that script read within seconds, and they can hang up the call and move on.
Exactly.
So, again, he tells Sinatra, you need to go to this gas station in Carson City, Nevada, and wait for a phone call. And so what I think here now is Keenan now calls Irwin and says, Irwin,
yeah,
you need to put Junior on the phone, and you need to call this gas station in Carson City, Nevada.
Yes.
So Irwin starts calling the gas station. The gas station answers the payphone. Irwin says, hey, let me talk to Frank Sinatra.
Mm-hmm.
The gas station attendant says, I don't know what you're talking about, and keeps hanging up the phone. So I guess kind of probably minutes later, Sinatra shows up, runs into the gas station, and says, hey, I'm Frank Sinatra. Has anybody been calling me? And, of course, the attendant says, yeah, I thought they were pranks.
Yeah.
So, finally, Irwin talks to Sinatra. They actually let Junior get on the phone. He tells his dad that he's fine. And at this moment, Sinatra says, I'll give you $1 million for the safe return of my son.
Okay.
And the kidnappers, they refuse to negotiate this time because, again, the phone call's getting a little long. But they give Sinatra instructions, again, to go to another payphone, and that's going to be back in Los Angeles.
Okay. Wow.
So now Sinatra heads back to Los Angeles, and, of course, Keenan, he's on his way driving back there. These kidnappers, like you said, they're trying to stay on script and keep these calls less than a minute because Keenan has done this research that he really thinks the FBI cannot track these calls quickly.
Yes.
I can only imagine that, after Sinatra is on these payphones, again, this is a time in history that there are no cell phones. It's payphones.
Payphones.
And immediately when he hangs up, like with Irwin on the payphone, he immediately calls the FBI to say, hey, this is what they just said.
Yes.
This is what the next thing is. And again, at this time, to use a payphone, it cost a dime.
Yes. Yes.
So you had to put money into
for a lot of people that don't, that may be listening, they may not even know what we're talking about with a payphone. But there was a time before cell phones, obviously, there were called phone booths where you put a dime in, you made a call, and for long distance calls, it would have been more, and the operator would come on and say, "Please insert more money" and stuff.
Another 30 cents.
It seems so antiquated now, but this is how they had to operate then.
And again, this is all part of their Keenan's operation that he has selected these payphones because he knows the numbers to them.
Yes.
And they can make these calls. So on December 10th, Sinatra gets another call, and at this time, they tell him the ransom is $240,000.
Not 1 million, but
right.
okay.
So Sinatra's offered 1 million.
No,
but they don't want his 1 million. They only want.
They just want 240. What a bargain!
Exactly. So now we'll move into that fifth stage, and this is how the ransom is going to get paid.
Yeah.
So Sinatra calls the bank president, who opens up a vault and gets $240,000 out. The money is given to the FBI right then.
Yeah.
And just like we talked about before in the D.B. Cooper case, that ransom money, there's some type of an inventory done by the FBI.
Sure, they mark the numbers, the serial numbers.
They take photographs
Yes.
of it and things like that. So in this case, it takes time for the FBI to do all that.
Yes.
And they end up putting the money in a satchel. There's more calls to payphones with Sinatra. I think at one point they actually have Sinatra go to the airport.
Yeah, they're bouncing him around. Yeah.
They go to the airport ticket counter.
Yeah.
So he has to go up there and say, hey, I'm Frank Sinatra. And he calls from yep, here's a call for you. But eventually, throughout the last call, it's going to be, hey, there's 2 school buses parked at a gas station.
Yes.
Drop the money in between the 2 parked school buses
Yes.
at a gas station. So, and then once the kidnappers pick up the money, they're going to make their last call back to Sinatra and say, this is where your son's at.
Yeah.
And
meanwhile, Frank Jr. is in this safe house in L.A., just spending time with Amsler and Irwin.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and Keenan's there too. And I'm sure, I know you've Googled and you've looked at the house before. I'm sure wherever he's at, even though he's blindfolded, he's hearing this conversation. He's probably
Absolutely.
aware that there is going to be a money drop, things like that.
Yes.
Because in fact, Keenan and Amsler are the 2 that are actually going to go and pick up the money up.
Yes.
So, and I'm sure Junior hears them leave and knows that they're driving to pick up the money.
Yes.
And so on their way to pick up the money, Keenan drives. They see the school buses. They see the money sitting there. So Keenan tells Amsler, hey, I'm going to drop you off. I'll make the block, and I'll come back and pick you up.
Okay.
And that's exactly what Keenan does. And he comes back to pick up Amsler, and when he gets there, there's no Amsler.
Yeah.
Amsler's gone. But the satchel's still sitting there. Keenan sees, again, he sees FBI agents because this is in a part of time at night that there probably wouldn't be taxi cabs, but he sees 2 taxi cabs out there.
Yeah.
Not only does the taxi cab have a driver, but it's got a front seat passenger.
Yeah.
They're both wearing fedoras, hats. He knows they're FBI agents. He sees an ice cream truck out there that night.
Yeah.
He knows that there's FBI agents inside that ice cream truck.
Right.
But again, going back to Keenan's plan, he knows they're not going to apprehend him because they don't know where Junior's at yet.
Because, at this point, Junior is still, they haven't released him yet.
And Keenan knows that. So Keenan then, he jumps out of the car, runs up, he gets the satchel, jumps back in his car, and takes off and heads over to the safe house.
Yes.
And of course, when he gets to the safe house, what do you think he finds?
That Junior's already gone.
Exactly. Irwin and Junior are already gone.
Yeah.
So Keenan goes over to a friend's house, and while he's there, he hears on the radio that Junior is safe at his mother's house. While they're at this friend's house, they actually pour all the money out on the floor. They roll around in the money. They throw it in the air.
Sure.
Because
they think they've won. They think this is a win.
Exactly. There was actually a television broadcast of Sinatra in his driveway, and Sinatra is smiling.
Yes.
It's Sinatra's birthday. And he says, "Greatest present I've ever gotten is my son's home."
I can't even imagine how terrifying that would have been, and then how joyful it would be that your son is safe.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think Keenan thinks like it's all good.
Yeah.
This was money well spent by the Sinatra family, but he knows
this is an investment.
Keenan knows that this money is going to grow.
Yeah.
He's got these investments. It's all going to work out.
Yes.
So later that day, Keenan calls Irwin to say to what happened. And Irwin says, well, I got nervous when you guys left, and I just decided to drive Junior to his mom's house, and I dropped him off nearby his mom's house.
Yes. Yeah.
And after, after actually being dropped off, Junior sees a security guard.
Yeah.
And he walks up to the security guard and says, "Hey, I'm Junior. I'm the kidnapped victim. Everybody's looking for me."
Yeah.
The security guard says, "Well, to avoid press that's at your mom's house, I'm going to put you in the trunk of my car and drive you to the house."
Yeah. It had to flash through his mind that, is this guy in on it?
Exactly.
Is this another stage of the kidnapping?
Exactly. So, Junior is going to be interviewed by FBI agents, and he's going to describe what he knows.
Yeah.
But again, he only knows them as Guy 1, Guy 2, and Guy 3.
Right.
He says that he was blindfolded most of the time, and really he was held hostage for about 54 hours.
Yes.
Now when
and at this point, Todd, when the Bureau actually starts interviewing him, they're going to want to know all kinds, the tiniest details, because there was a famous case, a kidnapping case the FBI worked in the 1930s of an Oklahoma oil man that was kidnapped by none other than Machine Gun Kelly. And he was kidnapped in Oklahoma and brought to a farm in Texas. And they kept him out in a room in a barn. They gave him water and food, but he was mainly blindfolded the whole time. And what he noticed is he was kidnapped or held there for maybe 4 or 5 days. And he noticed during that time that every day, it seemed to be around the same time, a plane would go overhead. And he noticed several other details that just by just laying there blindfolded, he just paid attention. And so when he was released, it's the same thing. It was a successful handoff of the ransom. The victim was released, and so then he starts telling him the story. So they backtracked and figured out what time of day and where this plane would be, and they actually narrowed it down to where the farm was where he was held. And so that's what broke open the case. So in this case, in Sinatra, same thing. They're going to be grilling him on just the tiniest details. What noises did you hear? Was there anything consistent? So those kind of details. That's what they're going for.
And what happens, just like Irwin had told Keenan that he got nervous, and that he drove him away. In fact, he does that. But when he drives away, Irwin doesn't know where he's at. Mm-hmm. He doesn't know how to get to Nancy Sinatra's house. So he actually stops and asks for directions.
Yeah.
And Junior overhears the conversation of how these directions are going. Uh-huh. So now Junior gets an idea of where he's at.
Where he is, yes. Exactly.
Because that's going to take us right into the stage number 6, which is the arrest stage, right?
Yes.
So immediately, the FBI, they're tracking these clues. They're tracking the description of this location where the Junior thought
and they're going to all these payphones, all that kind of stuff. They're going to try to get fingerprints. I mean, now that they're free to do, just the open investigation, they don't have to hide in ice cream trucks anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's really the next day, they find the safe house. Mm-hmm. And once they find the safe house, they're able to get all the telephone records.
They can find out who rented this house, who's been here. You talk to the neighbors. So, all this stuff starts unraveling pretty quickly.
And all this, what the FBI, they're this investigative progress that they're having, the fact that Junior was released, it's all reported in the media. It's national breaking news at the time that they found this house. I can only imagine, the kidnappers, they're feeling this federal heat, right?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
They know the FBI is coming. They're as soon as Keenan hears that the FBI found the safe house, he gets really nervous at this point.
It's only a matter of time until they link him to that house.
So, like you had said earlier before, when they probably FBI interviewed John Foss, who was with Sinatra when he was kidnapped. Mm-hmm. Now Foss has given this description. There's a police artist who's come in, and they've drawn this sketch. Keenan thinks it looks just like him, to the point that Keenan now goes and shaves his head.
Okay. All right.
They're getting paranoid, and now they decide that they're going to split up. And Irwin decides that he's going to go to San Diego, spend the night with his brother, and then he's going to head on and lay low in New Orleans. But sometime during the night, while he's visiting his brother, Irwin confesses to his brother that he was part of this kidnapping.
Yeah.
So the very next morning...
So it's the tough guy that breaks first.
Right. So the very next morning, sometime between 8:15 a.m. in the morning and 8:30 a.m., the brother calls the FBI office in San Diego and gives up his brother. Now, they probably got a hold of a duty agent that morning.
Yes.
We've both been duty agents before.
Yes, we have.
How awesome was that to get this call?
It would be pretty cool. It'd be pretty cool because most of your duty calls don't end up being that credible. You know?
In fact, this duty agent, he doesn't believe what the brother is saying until Irwin himself gets on the phone and says, yes, this is how it went down. Gives him enough information that by 9 o'clock that morning, the FBI agents are over there at the house. And Irwin says, hey, my share of the ransom money is in my car. Yeah. That's here. Right. And the agent sees that money. Irwin ends up going to the FBI office, and he's interviewed. And that day, he has a 27-page confession. Yes. Typed out. Sure. That he signs. Sure. Because of the phone calls that were made at the safe house. Yeah. The FBI is able to locate one of Keenan's friends, and through that friend, they kind of find out the whereabouts of where Keenan is. Yeah. And on December 14th, Keenan's arrested.
This is not even a week later.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Just really days after once he's released.
This well thought out, this highly planned kidnapping just falls apart in less than a week.
Right. Yeah. And Keenan says, hey, the ransom money is over at this apartment. So he actually goes there with the FBI to that apartment. And when they get there, Amsler just happens to be at the apartment, and they seize about $168,000 of the ransom money. Yeah. Was there. He's arrested. He confesses to his involvement. He has a 2-page confession. Keenan confesses, and he signs a 13-page confession. Okay. Yeah. Which is kind of crazy now is that, really within months, in February, so not even 2 months later,
Todd,
the trial starts.
Just real quickly, so one thing that struck me is I think for most people, what they may have an image in their mind of what these guys would have looked like, Keenan and Amsler and everything. What struck me is how clean cut these guys looked.
Exactly.
They did not look like what maybe would come to mind as a kidnapper.
Exactly. So now go back to the roadblocks up by Lake Tahoe, and you're that officer out in the snowstorm. Yeah. And they stop. Yeah. And it's actually Junior and the kidnapper, but yet they're so clean cut.
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't. They fit together. There's nothing unusual there.
So the story that they come up and how they bluff the police. Yeah. It's all believable. Yeah. So again, stage 7 here of the trial. Again, within 2 months, the trial starts. Yeah. It's just crazy how fast this happens.
Things went a little faster in those days in those kind of.
The defense and the defense attorneys, they have a list of their witnesses, and one of the people on their list is a guy by the name of Dean Torrance. Now, Dean Torrance, he's of the surf rock duo Jan and Dean. He's that Dean. Okay. So he's a famous guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And he is friends with Keenan.
Okay.
In fact, when we said before Keenan's car accident, when Keenan was successful in the stock market, yes, he was investing a lot of money
of Dean's money,
making Dean some money. They actually shared a safe deposit box together at a bank.
And also, Jan and Dean, they were a pretty big deal. They had some real hits. They were friends with Brian Wilson, who was the main songwriter, the musical genius of the Beach Boys. Yeah. So, this is not some just run-of-the-mill band we're talking about.
And so, at some point in their investigation by the FBI, they actually get into that safety deposit box that's owned by Dean and Keenan together.
The joint.
And there's some of the ransom money is found inside there. So during the trial now, Dean actually takes the stand.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
And he says he did not know anything about the kidnapping, didn't know anything about the ransom money. And so his testimony kind of goes nowhere. But at this point, prior to that, that this was the headlines in the paper.
Was his testimony just mainly about the safety deposit box? Because I mean, this is a safety deposit box you jointly own, and there is some of the ransom money in it. So I have to think that they thought of Dean as a suspect, maybe briefly, but still, you had to be suspicious of him.
You know, there's also talk that at some point that maybe Keenan gave Dean $25,000 of the ransom money that Dean held for maybe a day, and then said, no, Keenan, come back, pick it back up.
Yeah.
I want nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
So again, that morning he takes the stand, says, I don't know anything about a kidnapping. I didn't know anything about ransom money. They have a lunch break during that trial, but when they come back from lunch break, Dean now says to the judge, hey, I think I committed perjury. I want to go back on the stand.
Yeah, I want to clear this up.
And so he goes back on the stand, and he testifies that, yes, he knew of this kidnapping, but he did not think Keenan was ever going to go through with it.
He just thought this is just whiskey talk. This is just,
that Keenan being crazy.
Yes.
Never thought that he would do it. He says, yes, over that planning operation time period, he did loan Keenan money and just said, hey, I didn't know what it was for, kind of like that. Which is really weird is that Dean avoids any type of perjury charges.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times someone will, if you do want to, let's say because he wanted to correct it. So that makes it a little less of a murkier to try to charge him now with perjury.
Right.
So,
and also, I think there's rumors at the time that Jan and Dean professionally suffered because of Dean's association with this kidnapping.
It's got to be some bad press, no question about that.
In fact,
and also,
it's Frank Sinatra.
I was going to say, Sinatra had pull in the music world, and probably a lot of doors were shut to Jan and Dean just because of that.
Right.
Yep.
Also, during this trial, the defense attorneys argue that Junior engineered this, that this was just a hoax, that it was a stunt.
That he was in on it.
That he was in on it.
Yeah, and Todd, that's actually not an unusual thing. I actually worked on a kidnapping case where the victim was involved. In fact, he actually recorded his voice to be used as the proof of life, when they made the ransom call to say, hey, they've got me, I'm scared, please, get me out of this. But what he didn't know was that the people he's working with to kidnap him, their idea was for him to record that call, and then they killed him. And so it was just brutal. But so actually the kidnapping victim being involved is not unusual. I mean, it does happen.
And again, they can say, hey, look at all the media attention that Junior got out of this. This has to help him professionally.
Yeah, it's a publicity stunt.
Right.
Yeah.
That he helped get through the roadblocks, things like that.
Yeah.
But, I think the trial lasts about a month. There's 74 witnesses.
Man, that's a long time for when all three suspects have written confessions.
Right.
That's a long.
The prosecutors call 74 witnesses. The defense only calls 9. Two of their witnesses are actually Irwin and Amsler, both testify. Keenan does not testify.
Okay.
The jury, after about 7 hours of debate, they come back and they find Keenan and Amsler guilty on all 6 charges.
Yeah.
They were charged with conspiracy to kidnap, interstate transportation of a kidnapped person.
Yeah.
3 counts of interstate telephone calls demanding ransom.
Sure.
And receiving ransom money. Now, Irwin, again, he didn't take part up in Lake Tahoe of the actual kidnapping.
He was part of the original scheme,
right?
That was stopped because the execution date was going to be on, or not execution in sense of capital murder,
right.
but the start date for the original plan of the kidnapping was to be on November 22nd, 1963. That's the day JFK's assassinated. That throws the plan in. Irwin and Amsler say,
they sort of back
I think
out.
I'm out of it. So Irwin's out of it all this time. And then once Keenan carries it out, Keenan calls him and says, "Hey, I've got him. You got to help me now." So then he jumps into it at that point.
So out of the 6 charges, Irwin's only found guilty on 5 of them. This idea of he was found not guilty on the interstate transportation of a kidnapped person.
Yes,
he wasn't part of that.
Makes sense because he wasn't part of it,
and that's the big charge because being found guilty of that carried a life sentence. So Irwin is sentenced to 75 years, and Keenan and Amsler are both sentenced to life in prison plus 75 years.
Yeah,
they got the maximum.
Yeah,
but their sentences are all deferred until a psychiatric examination can be done.
Okay.
And now there, again, there's appeals and there's these psychiatric exams are done, and eventually all their sentences are going to be reduced to 25 years.
Okay.
Amsler and Irwin both end up serving about 3.5 years, and Keenan serves about 4.5 on this.
Okay. Yeah, that's not to me. That's not necessarily that unreasonable. No one was hurt, and obviously you can't go around kidnapping people, but it's also I don't really quite think, at least the circumstances of this case, don't really justify a life sentence.
Right. Keenan, he's probably by 1968, he's released from prison. Again, he was very successful prior to that car accident, prior to the kidnapping, and
a smart guy, no doubt.
And I think they're saying like by 1983, his net worth is estimated at over $17 million.
Wow, he did well, and so maybe Frank should have just left that money with him.
Yeah, they could have invested it. In 1999, Columbia Pictures offers these 3 guys $1.5 million for their story.
Yeah,
I think
it's a really interesting story.
They want to sell their story. It turned it into a movie, but Junior files a lawsuit to block the movie deal. And he says, I guess there's a California law that felons can't profit from their crimes.
Yeah, I don't know when that went into effect, but because I know there was some issue about that with the son of Sam. Yeah.
Right. So there's a long legal battle over this, and eventually I think Junior wins that they can't make the movie, but I think later they end up being able to sell their story. They just didn't get to keep the money, which again I don't think Keenan needed the money, and they gave it to charity. After Amsler is released from prison, he actually works as a stunt double and a bodyguard in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Eventually, he leaves Hollywood. He goes to Virginia and works some construction jobs, and he passes away in May of 2006.
Okay, but he didn't turn out financially as well as Keenan did.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And I think in the late 1990s, Irwin passed away. Not much what happened to him afterwards out there. So
okay, we don't know much about his story.
Yeah, not much about his. Now, again, as an investigator in all these years, a lot of people still believe it was a hoax. That Junior was behind this.
It was a publicity stunt,
and I just
kickstart his career.
I just can't imagine the logistics of going 500 miles to be part of this kidnapping up in Lake Tahoe and go back with the roadblocks, things like that. I think if Junior would have been involved in this, then Foss would never have been in the room that night.
I just don't find it believable because, for goodness sake, his name is Frank Sinatra Jr. Okay, so his career is already kickstarted.
Exactly.
His father can open any door for him in the industry. It's just a matter, really, of him just doing, just doing his time and sticking with it and doing shows, and the path is open for him.
And again, if he's involved in this, I think that they kidnap him after a show. They don't do it before the show because it's a paying gig. He wants to get his money.
Sure.
They're not going to kidnap before that.
Yeah, I don't buy into the hoax theory.
No. Now, the FBI has some pretty strong evidence that it wasn't a hoax because I told you that they go to that safety deposit box that Keenan owns with Dean together, and they actually get Dean's consent to open it.
Okay.
And so Dean actually opens it, and inside the box, not only was there that ransom money in there, but there was some stock certificates that belonged to Dean that were in there. And then there
stuff
was
you would expect to find in there.
Yep. And there was a letter in there that was addressed to Keenan's mother, written by Keenan, where he confesses that if you're reading this letter, then I've been caught.
That was in the safety deposit box.
That was in the safety deposit box.
Wow, I would think that would be Exhibit A at trial.
Exactly. And I think they went back and looked in the logs of who had been there, and Dean had not been to the safety deposit box in weeks. So even though ransom money was found in that safety deposit box that belonged to Dean, Dean had no idea that was in there.
A safety deposit box is relatively not that expensive. So why do they need to have a joint safety deposit box? What else was it that they jointly owned or that they needed to protect in
I think it was the stock certificates. I think that Keenan was doing those deals.
Okay. Because Dean had invested with Keenan.
And so I'm sure that he's adding more stocks in there.
So as Keenan buys and sells more stocks, he puts those in the safety deposit box, then Dean can access those when he needs. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Right. And I know, like, throughout this, we've always talked that, Keenan was the mastermind behind this. But, sometimes I look at this and I say, was it maybe Junior was really the smartest guy? Because, again, he went with the kidnapping. He came up with the story. He gave the ring to him to hold.
Yeah.
It was almost like, although he's only 19 years old and he's younger than all of them, but he seems to be in control.
Again, to me, it's probably just, he made good choices for his survival. Because initially, he doesn't know how dangerous these guys are. They've gone to they've broken into his room. They've got guns. So they could just kill him. He was scared at this point, right? And so he had to, he's trying to figure out a way to survive. And initially, it's like, I better play along with these guys. And then again, like we discussed, I think once he got a feel for these guys, he realized they're not quite as tough as they presented themselves.
So I even think that whole idea of Irwin saying, hey, I was nervous when you two went to go pick up the ransom money, so therefore I let Junior go. I almost believe that was Junior's idea. When he heard those two leave, he told Irwin, hey, let me go, and when you guys all get caught, I'll tell them guy number 3 was very helpful and let me go.
Sure.
I think that's very possible.
And again, that's Sinatra Jr. just getting to know these guys and seeing where their weak points are.
Right. Now, again, as we wrap up here, these are just some interesting things I saw as an investigator in this case. And one of the things that was kind of strange was that Keenan had also, in this pre-stage kidnapping time, he discussed the idea of kidnapping Bob Hope's son. Again, Bob Hope,
another candidate that they had talked about.
Right.
Yeah.
But Keenan felt that Bob Hope would not have been able to handle the pressure of the kidnapping.
Bob Hope doesn't seem like as tough a guy as Frank Sinatra.
Exactly.
But again, it all goes back to, I think Bob Hope is a better target because he's not connected to the mafia. He's not a tough guy. So, the tough guy may decide, you know what? I'm coming after you myself.
Right.
I don't see Bob Hope doing that.
Right. Another unique thing is about 30 years after this kidnapping, Keenan is on a date, and he actually goes to a performance by Junior.
That's great. I love it.
And so there's this period after the show that there's a meet and greet, and Keenan and this person that he's with, they actually get to meet Junior. Now, Junior does not recognize Keenan as the guy who had kidnapped him, or recognize him as guy number 1.
Okay.
And of course, Keenan doesn't bring it up. Doesn't bring it up in front of the person he's with.
That's very polite of him.
Yeah, he doesn't tell Junior, hey, remember me from 30 years ago.
It actually kind of would have been funny funny in the sense to just interesting, that is, to see how Sinatra would have reacted to that.
Also, looking through the FBI file on this, there's this heavily redacted report from August 11th, 1967.
Mm-hmm.
Again, why it's so redacted, I have no idea, but you can make out this little this little sentence in there that I guess a source tells the FBI that, after Irwin releases Junior and Junior meets the security guard, and the security guard
puts him in the trunk
of the car.
Yes.
So in appreciation for what that security guard did, Frank Sinatra gave $1,000 to that security guard.
security guard.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
again why
that's
it's
nice.
Why it's in the file. It's kind of crazy that it's in there, but it's unique. I thought that was kind of neat as an investigator.
It's a nice little tribute and a kind of an interesting little historical tidbit.
Also, during the calls between the kidnappers and Frank Sinatra, again, he's ordered to go to these payphones around, and Sinatra's afraid that he's not going to have enough dimes to continue with these phone calls. And
that's critical.
For the rest of his life, he always carries 10 dimes in his pocket.
10 dimes in his pocket.
In fact, when he's buried, they bury him with 10 dimes in his pocket.
And to me, that's kind of a touching little tidbit that, he really did love his son. And,
exactly.
And that in case anything like that happened again, he wanted to be prepared for it.
And like I told you from the very beginning on this is a great movie. This is a great movie script. There's a lot of drama, there's action, a little bit of comedy in here. And it, I guess my question to you would be, if this is a movie, what part would you like to play in this?
Man, I want to play Keenan because I end up with $17 million.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of crazy that you would have said him, the bad guy. And now in this,
Todd, as an actor, you always want to play the bad guy.
Well, I tell you what.
Because you always have a role.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think I would like to play the FBI agent in San Diego that gets the duty agent call.
The duty agent call. Okay.
Because
that's a small but pivotal part of the story.
Because like I told you, I have been the duty agent so many times. I don't know, when I was at some bigger offices, you'd be the duty agent for the whole week.
Yes,
and
that's how it was when I was in Chicago.
And they would pass the calls on to you that were duty agent calls. And the worst part was you got the walk-ins who came in and wanted to speak to agents.
Yes.
And you'd have to go out in the lobby and interview them.
Yes.
And again, on the weekends, on Saturday and Sunday, your days off, sort of, you're the duty agent.
Yes.
And you're always getting calls at 7 o'clock Saturday night, midnight,
and just so
4
people
a.m.
know, for the most part, I would say 98, if not the higher percentage of duty calls and walk-in complaints turn out to be absolutely nothing because there just seem to be just complete whack jobs.
Exactly.
In fact, I want to say, Todd, we could probably reminisce about 2 or 3 complainants that we passed back and forth where I said, this is a problem for the Secret Service. You need to go see them.
You sent
and
them
no
over
doubt you sent some our way as well.
Yes. So, again, what satisfaction? I mean, that guy who took that call, who goes to Irwin's brother's house that day, arrest Irwin.
Well, that's the thing about complaint duty is even though the large majority of the complaints you get are either not under your jurisdiction, in other words, it's a local crime or whatever, or they're just completely whack jobs that are hearing voices and so forth, you have to actually be serious and take and listen until you can definitively say, this is not, this is not anything. Because you never know when that call is coming in that this is real. So you have to always assess that.
And again, this is the #1 crime going on in the United States right now. Everyone's looking for these guys. And you get the phone call that morning, and you drive over to his house, and now you're agent of the year.
There it is.
For solving this and getting some of the ransom money recovered there.
So you'd be the hero of the story, and I'd be the bad guy. But anyway, that's how it ends up, I guess.
Well, you said it. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this one.
Yeah, this is a great one. This is really fun.
This is, like I said from the beginning, this is it's so fascinating that this even happened. Well, hey, thank you for listening. And please leave comments. And we've gotten a lot of compliments on our theme music, and I want to give a shout-out to Eddie Bandis, who composed that music for us.
For anyone interested in having Eddie maybe do some work for them, some composing, if you're interested in his work, we're going to leave his contact information in the description, so please check that out. This has been the Back in Crime podcast presented by Texas Crime Travelers Todd Hiles and Stewart Fillmore. We are the executive producers. Grace Hiles is the producer and director. Theme music composed by Eddie Bandus. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and our YouTube channel at Texas Crime Travelers.